you're more focused. You're mentally fresh. You're not as wore down from being in the woods all the time. I just feel like it's a better time to focus on these big mature bucks.
When it comes to like targeting specific mature bucks, do you like what's your thought process between hunting early season versus the rut or late season when it comes to targeting specific bucks, especially those kind of bucks you're hunting up in the mountains on public land?
Well, honestly, I think it's the best time to try to kill them because those deer are just so in a tighter pattern early in the season than they are during the rut. I hear many mountain hunters say they hate the rut because these deer are just running so wide and so far. Sometimes it can be very, you're sitting for days sometimes waiting for them to come back through. But I feel like this time of the year, it's just they're in a much more condensed area from food and cover and all that. And it's funny, I was just reading actually yesterday from Penn State, their forest blog. I like to read that from time to time. I know you guys have talked about that before, but they had an article in there showing like how far bucks are moving in that month of September. And then it's about October 15th is when it starts to ramp up. So, really these states, mountain states that have early season openers that start in September, and you guys really have a month or more, month and a half that you can be targeting those. Unfortunately, here we don't open until usually the end of September, beginning of October. So, you get about a 2-week window. And I've been thinking about some of that, what does make that better? And I think it's just they are so condensed right then that you can even use your trail camera data for right now. Oftentimes you hear guys talking about using that historical data, which is very good that time of year. But oftentimes you can use your trail camera data because that deer is not going to be 10 miles away the next time you check that camera or whatever. So you kind of have a period of time that if you're running trail cameras like I do, you can use that in real time almost because that buck is still going to be using that kind of pattern right then and there. And I just think it just helps condense them down. I mean, their food, their bedding, all of that. And they're more daylight active. They're unpressured this time of year. And you have all summer to get ready for this. I kind of look at it like when you watch those guys in NASCAR, they're training for that Daytona 500 to come up, and that's kind of what like opening day is to me. It's like you're starting that time. Well, no other time during the year can I go and get all that camera data and not be focused on hunting, because once hunting season starts, we all know now we're hunting. It's hard to check cameras. It just gets to be a lot more difficult. But coming into that early season, your opening of the season, I think you're more focused. You're mentally fresh. You're not as wore down from being in the woods all the time. I just feel like it's a better time to focus on those big mature bucks and nobody's doing it in the mountains for the most part. The pressure's low. I know there's some areas of the country where it happens more, probably more in ag country and things like that. But in the mountains, I hear a lot of people complain about the heat, the bugs, the snakes, all those kinds of things that potentially could be out there that time of year. But it really is an untapped time in the mountains, I think, sure.
So one thing, Chad, that you mentioned that some people, depending on their hunting strategy, either may not understand or accept as it being an easier time to hunt, which is you're mentioning specifically early season, like this September, getting to early October, these bucks aren't moving a whole bunch. They're staying in a very small area. Now, a lot of guys that like hunt the rut like when those deer doing those long kind of, travel patterns. You hunt terrain features and you never know what buck could come by. But when you're talking about hunting specific deer, that's the advantage of early season is these bucks home ranges are pretty small from especially what you're talking about hunting in the mountains on public land. They're pretty tight little home ranges in core areas that you can find in order to get a pattern on a buck in order to go in there and selectively harvest one specific deer, not just kind of have a random hunt and not know what's going to come by there, but actually be sitting with confidence on a specific deer and try to get him killed. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when I killed this big deer here, that's exactly why I was in there, was to kill him. And I had told my buddy the year before, because I'd been chasing that deer for a few years. and I'd hunted him during the rut. I mean, I had pictures of that buck over a 1.5 mile span on multiple cameras during the rut. So, I mean, that's hard to focus in on sometimes and hone in. And I told him the year before I killed him, I said, if I'm going to kill him, it's going to be early season. And so I made more of an effort that year to find him in the early season, and it worked out. But it's, once those acorns, especially, I mean, we live in a very oak hickory dominated woods. We don't have some of the other terrain that some mountain areas have. But these acorns, I mean, this past week, that's pretty much what I was doing. I'm looking for where those acorns are falling, and I'm going to take and find where that specific buck is. And then I'm going to start looking, where's his bedding, where's the acorns in relation to him, because they're not just going to go anywhere. I mean, they're going to be in a pretty tight area. So that's the biggest factor. Is a lot of those guys that hunt terrain funnels a lot of times in the rut aren't going to be successful in this, because if you're just looking at terrain funnels, they're not moving through them. They might be, if a buck's living in an area close to that terrain funnel, he could be moving through that. But as a whole, they're not moving through those big terrain funnels that a lot of guys focus in for the rut. A lot of times what I find is going to be smaller terrain features within that little core area that you got to focus on.